afternoon, good evening, good morning to Googlers around the world. My name is Kunle Oguneye. I'm a cloud consultant in the PSO, the Cloud CCE organization. I'm coming to you from Atlanta. I'm a member of Africans at Google. I'm Nigerian by birth. Today, we're going to be hearing from a wonderful author from Zimbabwe, Elizabeth Nyamayaro. She's founder of He for She. She worked at the United Nations. She's worked in private sector, and her story is inspirational and motivational on many, many levels. I think you're going to enjoy it today, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Elizabeth, over to you.
Hey, Kunle, it's so exciting to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Really, this is an honor for me. I told my children yesterday that, I'm going to be talking to someone that was interviewed by. So now my kids think that I'm really cool if I can be talking to someone that spoke with Trevor Noah. They're like, "Oh, Dad, okay." So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
You are really, really cool, Kunle. So your kids are right. Your kids are absolutely right.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so before we get started, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about you.
So I grew up in Zimbabwe. In fact, this here behind me is my home. This is the hut where I grew up. And I was raised by my gogo, my grandmother. And I had a beautiful childhood growing up because we lived as part of a community, a very tight-knit community, which meant that we did everything together. We farmed together, we harvested together, we shared our food with each other and really never wanted for anything. But sadly, when I was 8 years old, a severe drought, really this was sort of the very first early warnings of climate change, devastated my village. And we were suddenly in this sort of dire situation where there was nothing to eat or drink. And in this moment, that's also where my dream to become a humanitarian came from, because there was an incident that happened that inspired me to become a humanitarian. So that's my story. I work at the United Nations right now, a special advisor on addressing global hunger.
Yes. You know what is remarkable about your story? It appears you remember everything. And you and I are of the similar generation. We're children of the 1970s. I'm older than you, but we're still children of the 1970s. And I'm trying to remember things that happened to me when I was 8 or 9 or 10, and I can't remember them, but you remember so vividly. Please speak about that.
No, but I was going to say, like, if you were raised by my gogo, you would remember so many things. She was such a profound teacher. And it was just her and I, she raised me as an only child, and she spoke to me and nurtured me almost as an adult. From a very young age, I understood bigger concepts about life through her wisdom. And so it's very easy for me to remember, because also it's one of the most precious moments that I cherish, no matter how far I have accomplished or how far I've gone in my life. I'm always anchored in my home. I wake up every morning and see this picture in my house. So that's how grounded I am in terms of where I come from.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Yeah. That is beautiful. So tell us why you wrote the book. And by the way, folks, if anybody can see the book, this is it. I Am a Girl from Africa. All right.
So I wrote the book really for two reasons. The first one was about representation, right? I realized the higher that I got in the UN system, the higher that I achieved as an individual, I realized that there was an opportunity to also have more African voices. Usually our stories are told by others. People go into the African continent and they tell the African story. And I felt compelled that, I owed it to myself, but also to the young Elizabeth still on the African continent, for them to see what's possible for us. That a girl from a small village can dare to dream big, achieve her dream, and actually do something that creates positive impact in the world. So that was really my first motivation, for brown girls everywhere to see what's possible for ourselves. And then the second reason for me was as a humanitarian, I also realized that we are living in a world that is getting more and more divided. I mean, we only have to look at what's happening right now in the Ukraine to realize that something isn't working. And I was raised with this beautiful ancient African wisdom of Ubuntu, which I firmly believe could be a very, very important tool in addressing inequalities. So I also wanted to bring this wisdom out of Africa of what it means to be human, of what it means to understand how to solve for these pressing inequalities. Ubuntu literally means I am because we are, right? And because we are, you are. So it recognizes that we are so connected by our shared humanity, and that because of this, it's our responsibility to take care of one another, to exercise compassion, and to really find a way to come together versus looking to create divisions amongst ourselves.
Elizabeth, let's talk a little bit about that, right? Like I
Yeah.
say, we grew up in Africa at the same times. When I grew up, we didn't have fences between the houses.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is Ubuntu, does it still exist across the continent? Right? We have xenophobia in different parts of Africa where we are expelling our brothers. We have all these internal conflicts. And then now you go across cities in Nigeria, it's just high fences all over the
Yeah.
place. And I wonder what happened to us in the last 40 years.
So I am always very forgiving of Africans because I understand our struggles, right? I was born during a revolution. And so I know what it is to fight for equality. And I think we often, when we look at the African continent, we are very quick to judge, and we don't look at all the damages that has been caused by colonialism. Colonialism did a very, very damaging thing for the continent, right? It divided us, it separated us. It was a divide and conquer kind of strategy. So I firmly believe, through my humanitarian work, that Ubuntu exists. And no matter how much war there exists among us, we also can't forget that no matter which community you go to in an African country, and that's been my experience at least, you will find people with very, very little, but they are willing to share the little that they have with you. So I think Ubuntu still lives on the continent, but I also know that we are living in a world that is just, there's such rising inequalities. And of course, scarcity creates xenophobia, right? We are not chasing our brothers out of Nigeria or South Africa because we hate them. We're chasing them because there's scarcity of jobs, because there's scarcity of opportunities. And we feel that we've got to hold on to that. So but to your point, I think I would like to see more Ubuntu be practiced with this younger generation. I think because of the influence as well from television that come from the West, I think there's a tendency now to think about the individual before the community. And I think there's something beautiful if we can safeguard this idea of the community, because even here we recognize we need it, right? With COVID, we recognize that if we understood that this is a group project, we would have handled COVID much more better, but we didn't because we thought about the individual first.
Hey, spot on, Elizabeth, spot on. Thank you so much. I meant to ask you, and I want to ensure that I ask. Tell us about the color yellow. I love your bright color. Everywhere I see you wearing yellow. Tell us why. Why does it resonate so much with you?
Thank you. So when I was 5 years old, and I know you also grew up in Africa, so you know that like from a young age you're put to work. I became in charge of my gogo's goats. We had 11 goats, and I was in charge of tying them up every single morning. And it was a lot of hard work. Wrangling goats is not easy. And I remember every time when I was done, because it was just very, very early in the morning, the sun would be coming up, and there was this beautiful yellow sky. And it symbolized for me hope and possibility. And so I wear yellow as a reminder of who I am and where I come from. And it's a way for me to take a piece of Africa with me. I also think, it's also intentional. I did want to change this misperception that Africa is a dark continent. And we are a vibrant continent. We are the most optimistic people I've ever met. And there's positivity coming from the continent. So this is my small way of honoring that.
We are. I want to ask you about your early childhood.
Yeah.
you talk about in the book. When you left Gogo and you went to your mother, when your mother came to get you, am I? So
Yeah.
I did some research, and Goromonzi, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Goromonzi
Yeah.
is your village.
It is.
But it's not far from Harare. It's only 30 miles or so from Harare. It's not that
Yes.
far.
Yes. But
So
I never.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Carry on. No. No. Carry on.
I was going to say between the time you were born or you and your mother came to get you, how old were you around that time? When
10.
you're 10.
Yeah.
You had never been to Harare in
No.
that time.
No.
That is so interesting. And your uncles and aunts, your sekurus and ambuyas used to go regularly, right? And no one took you, said just Elizabeth, come
Yes.
along.
No, it was the Sekuras who went to look for jobs. The Ambuya stayed behind, right, taking care of the house and the children. So no, I mean, also, I mean, we come from a very humble family. We didn't have money. It cost money to buy a ticket, bus ticket to go to the city. So I'd never been to the city before that.
Got you, got you. Okay. So tell us about that experience, not having your mom for those first 10 years and then all of a sudden meeting her at that when you are age 10.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a very confusing thing as a child, right? Because my mom had me when she was very young and she couldn't take care of me. So she left me with my gogo, my grandmother, who raised me as a child. And in fact, up until the age of 5, I thought my gogo was my mother. I didn't know that she wasn't my mother. And then she explained to me the story one day, and it was very heartbreaking for me because I just wanted Gogo to be my mother because I couldn't imagine having someone else. But the first drought happened, as I mentioned to you earlier on, and then there was another drought when I was 10 years old. And really, for fear of my life, my mother came to take me with her because there was just very little to eat in the village. And that's when I got to meet her for the first time. And she took me to, a township called Epworth, which was one of the impoverished communities where she lived with my father and my 3 siblings, and I got to meet them for the very first time. But it was very destabilizing at the time because I really didn't want to leave my village. I wanted to stay there. But in retrospect, it was one of the best gifts that my parents did for me because I also ended up in school, which allowed me to really dream big and see what was possible for myself.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. You must have shown promise as a student. Even in Goromonzi, you must have been a brilliant student.
Well, my gogo was a great teacher, right? I mean, so I was very, very, like, I loved learning and I loved being able to understand things, concepts that were bigger than even, most kids would understand at my age. Like this idea of Ubuntu. I learned this when I was 6 years old, right? My gogo saying, we are connected by our shared humanity. I was like, what does that mean? And then she explained to me. So it was really, really remarkable being able to go to school. I loved every single second of it and I excelled at it, which is how I'm able to sit here today and be with you.
I know. It's phenomenal. I mean, you start primary school in the township.
Yeah.
So what grade, what level do they put you in when you get to the township, where to that primary school? And I forget the name of the primary school now.
So I was in grade, because usually you start school at 7
Yes.
in my country. So
Okay.
7, 8, so 1, 7, 8, 9. So I was grade 4, grade 5, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at that point, were you behind your peers? Were you at par with your peers? You were behind.
No, completely behind. And so that was very challenging. But also I realized too that it allowed me to it forced me actually to work harder, right? Because you don't want to be at the bottom of the school.
Yes.
And it really propelled me to the extent that only a year and a half after this, my mother ended up sending me to live in the city with my aunt because I was able to then go to an even better school because of all the achievement that I had, I'd been able to acquire while I was at this school.
Yeah, we must applaud your parents, right? Because it was a sacrifice for them, but they
Oh,
saw the promise in you and said,
yes.
we've got to give this girl, what do you call it? Mukuna?
Mukana?
Mukana.
Yeah.
Okay. What does
Yes.
Mukana mean?
So mukana means an opportunity. And I actually found that, even as a humanitarian, one of the things that often stand between girls and success is just opportunity, right? We live in a world that girls are continuously undermined in terms of what they're able and capable of achieving. And we take that opportunity away from them, and we don't educate them, and we send the boys to school instead of sending the girls. And I realized just how important that was. My own parents really didn't get a big mukana opportunity to go to school. And I think they understood from their own personal experience what a difference it would make. And they worked really, really hard to put all myself and my siblings in school. My father worked as a milkman. He worked as a gardener. He worked in a supermarket. Like my mother was selling chickens and rabbits in communities, right? And just trying to make ends meet so that we could all go to school. And we all went to school.
Yeah, that's the story of just remarkable. Of it's inspirational, and it is across the continent you see examples of that. But we have to give your parents props. Let me ask you this: your Aunt Jane, is your mother's older sister, right? She's
She is.
Gogo's daughter as well.
Yeah, she is.
She had a wonderful opportunity scholarship to, was it to Germany?
To Poland.
Poland.
And
Okay.
then ended up working in Germany, yes, which is where she met her
Okay.
husband. Yeah.
So how did that work? That's the 1950s, 1960s, maybe.
Yeah.
The Zimbabwean government at the time was giving scholarships to students regardless of gender.
Yeah. So actually she got a sponsorship from a family and ended up actually studying in Tanzania for a while. And then
Okay.
while she was in Tanzania, she got an opportunity to go and study abroad. And so she went to Poland and studied medicine. She then went to Germany, practiced medicine, and ended up meeting this wonderful man who was also a Zimbabwean man, an economist. And they got married and came back to Zimbabwe. And that was my Uncle Sam. And they didn't have a child of their own. And so they kind of took me in and raised me. And, there's a saying is, it takes a village. And my story is one of such, right? That it was my gogo, then my own parents, then my aunt and uncle. It took everyone to uplift me and give me the mukanas that most girls were not able to get.
You have every, as you speak, I just keep thinking this is remarkable. So you are Shona, right?
I am Shona.
Okay. So tell me that Shona people, the men don't take multiple wives. They don't.
I,
Are the men one wife, one man, or
No, it depends actually. I think that's an important conversation, and you of all people know this as well. So I'm preaching to the choir, but the continent is very diverse and we have very different tribes, even in my own country. I'm one of the dominant tribes, but there's other tribes. And so there are some tribes that have multiple wives, but my own tribe and like my own family, at least, we don't have the same practice.
yeah, it's amazing because Uncle Sam, some other tribes in Nigeria, if once there was no child within 2 years, they'll bring another wife. Oh, don't worry. So
Nah, yeah, no, they're a loving relationship and just
no, that's
again full of
fantastic.
respect and they they supported each other. My Uncle Sam again kind of defied what you typically think of an African man, if you will,
Yes,
using the word
yes,
loosely African, because
yes.
again, there's no one
You
type of
can, you
African man.
can, you can use it. Yeah. You can.
But he was the primary caregiver. My Aunt Jane worked all the time. She had a very and still has a very impressive job as a medical doctor, and she was working all the time at the forefront of addressing the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And my Uncle Sam became the primary caregiver. He would cook for me and do my homework with me and nurture me. So it was just a really wonderful equality relationship that I got to witness as a child.
If anyone is streaming, listening to us on YouTube, and you are a Nollywood film producer, this is a movie we of Elizabeth's life because we can learn so much from the different actors, from her mother, her father, her aunt, her uncle, her gogo. There are so many wonderful lessons of how to be. I really, really, really appreciate it. So
Thank you.
tell us, Elizabeth, about your inspiration to join the United Nations? That seminal moment
Yeah.
when, just tell us so that let the audience hear it from your words.
Yeah, so this story is a constant reminder to me that sometimes some of our greatest challenges also present us with our greatest opportunities. And that's exactly what happened to me. We are living in this beautiful village. We never want for anything. We have an abundance of food. Suddenly the drought comes and everything changes. We literally had nothing to eat and nothing to drink. And one day I collapsed on the ground just from hunger. And in my young mind, I actually thought I was going to die. But that's also when God delivered for me in such a big way. This fellow African who was a humanitarian with the United Nations, I call it the girl in the blue uniform, she found me and gave me a bowl of porridge and saved my life. And when I finally realized what had happened and who this woman was, immediately couldn't I remember thinking, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to be just like this girl so that one day I too can make a difference in the lives of others. And it became like this obsession of wanting to work for the UN, wanting to be a humanitarian. And I chased this dream across different continents. And here I am with God's blessing. I was able to achieve my dream. And I've just been humbled to be doing this work for more than 2 decades, working as a humanitarian with the United Nations.
No, it's really, really phenomenal. And I want to go through that journey.
Yeah,
You go to the primary school in the township. A year and
yeah.
a half later, you transfer to the British primary school. Can you tell us the name of that primary school, please?
Admiral Tate Primary
Admiral
School.
Tate. Yes, Admiral
Yeah,
Tate. And so
yeah,
you get to Admiral Tate, and you are even further behind at that
yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
And most of your classmates are white.
yes.
Tell us about that experience. That's integrating and not feeling, not having an inferiority complex.
Oh, I had an inferiority complex.
But
I literally questioned everything about myself because, again, at the township, we were not taught everything in English. And suddenly everything was being taught in English. And I didn't really speak English. And so I was way behind in terms of speaking, in terms of writing. And of course, I became an easy target for kids to bully me. But again, kids can be mean to each other, no matter where you are. And I really became a target for bullying, and I questioned so much about myself. I was judged because my skin was too dark. I was judged because my hair was too curly. Because even the black girls that went to school, their families were well off, and so they would straighten their hair. And I didn't have money to straighten my hair. Also, my aunt would never let me do that. By the way. And so, yeah, so it became really, really difficult for me to try and fit in. But it also, again, back to looking at these moments that are supposed to be very challenging and maybe supposed to break us, because this could have broken me, I realized that I was going to focus on the good in that. And the good in that was I was just being given an incredible opportunity to even excel, right? To learn at a much higher level than I would have been able to in the township. And so I just worked really hard. I worked really, really hard. And I'm sure some of the kids that made fun of me haven't achieved the kind of things that I've been able to achieve.
no, for sure.
Yeah.
I was talking to you before this. You illustrate some of the really mean things that some of the other classmates did to you,
Yeah.
and I have to applaud you that turned the other cheek. If it was me, I would go and find those people today, man. I would find them and give them a piece of my mind. Aye.
Well, remember, Dr. Martin Luther King said, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And so when you see people being hateful, the best thing that you can do is to introduce love to the equation, because the more hate you pile on, the more hate we receive, and all of us lose as a result. So I try my best. Obviously, I fail. I'm a human being. There are moments when I also just feel like maybe I should retaliate. But the best and the better way always is to figure out a way that we can, we can find compassion for each other, because there's enough hate in the world. And when we're able to, show each other the glimpse of compassion, even sometimes I think, I'm sure you've been in a situation where you're feeling very cranky and then someone just extends you a very nice and polite response, and you kind of start to feel bad about the situation, and you also become good in the process. So yeah, I don't think we should retaliate.
You're an angel. You're an angel. You're an angel from Zim. Tell us about he for she.
So He for She was an initiative that I launched with my colleagues at UN Women when I was senior advisor at the UN on gender equality. And really for me, the idea was simple, right? We had found ourselves in a situation where we were trying to figure out a way to accelerate progress towards gender equality. And often this issue has been seen as a woman's issue led by women for women. And as a result, the progress has been rather slow. In fact, even now, when we look at the issue of gender inequality, it is going to take us at least another 100 years to achieve equality. And it just felt so long, like we won't even be here in 100 years. And so I realized that perhaps this ancient wisdom of Ubuntu from the African continent could be used as a way to unite the genders, because there was a lot of tension, and frustration between genders, because women felt oppressed by men, because men were making all the decisions, because men were perpetrating gender-based violence against women. So the two sides were almost not seeing eye to eye and didn't want to see eye to eye. And of course, men felt villainized. So it was just a whole big challenging situation. And I realized that, again, when you think about what it means to be human, the fact that we belong to one human family, it also means that these issues of inequality have to be solved by all of us as a society. And I created this initiative as a way to bring allyship to the issue of gender inequality, because I realized, just like my Uncle Sam and my own father, that yes, there are some men out there who don't want to do the right thing and support gender equality, but there's a huge silent majority of men who also want to live in an equal world, who want a better world for their own daughters, for their own mothers and sisters and wives, even for themselves, right? Because gender inequality doesn't only, create issues for women. Men are also held by this kind of toxic masculinity, this macho normative culture is also something that men struggle with. And so that was the idea, to create allyship and solidarity. And He for She was launched in 2014. And to everyone's surprise, because there was also kind of the fear that men would not join such a movement, but within the first week of launching He for She, 100,000 men, at least one man in every single country in the world, they joined the movement, and there was 1.2 billion online conversations. And so it reminded me again that, we have to figure out a way to work on this together as a collective, because we can't put the burden on women to not get raped. Men should simply not rape women. We can't put the burden on women to break the glass ceiling. Men can also be part of removing that glass ceiling, right? So that's what it is about, trying to create true equality that benefits everyone.
So let me take a pause and just remind everyone, Elizabeth Nyamayaro from Zimbabwe, she wrote a book, Memoirs of Empowerment, Community, and Hope. Please, folks, put your comments and your questions on the chat. We will ask questions in the next 10, 15 minutes. But along those lines, Elizabeth, tell us what's the scorecard on gender inequality? Maybe specifically with Africa, but you feel free to speak globally.
It's not great. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's not great. So on some level, we have made progress. I think we are seeing more girls in school than we've ever seen before. We're seeing more women in the workplace than we've ever seen before. But what hasn't changed are the systems and the structures that perpetuate gender inequality. So we have more women in the workplace, but it's really, really hard for women to move up the career ladder. It's really, really hard for women to have equal pay for equal work. I mean, we still live in a society where men and women are doing exactly the same work, and the woman is still getting paid less than her male colleague. And that isn't right. And the crazy thing is that it's happening in every single country in the world. None of the countries have been able to do that. Iceland, as part of their He for She commitment, are on the way there, but So that's one thing I think that even frustrates me when I think about gender inequality. We have more girls in school, but we still have the structures and systems that perpetuate this idea that girls are not good at STEM, right? Girls can only do these subjects, and even when they graduate, right, they fall into this other workforce where again they are not being given the same opportunities as men are in getting those positions. And then just again, just to wrap up on the issue of agenda and the scorecard, and then but the biggest thing, Conley, the biggest thing that is an issue in every single country in the world is gender-based violence. 1 in 3 women and girls will be abused in her lifetime. And that's in every single country. It's not in Africa, it's not in Asia, it's not in the US, it's in every single country. So we have a society walking around wounded, which certainly does not benefit all of us. And so that for me is something that we really have to solve in a big way, because when women hurt, societies hurt, and women are hurting right now.
What can we do? What are 1 or 2 things that we can do as individuals to just, how do we raise our children, our male children, not to harm women?
So first of all, the easiest thing you can do is to educate yourself on the issues. If you go to heforshe.org, we have put resources for you on what you can do. And I think the other thing that you'll find is that creating change, while it's difficult, it isn't that complicated. It requires just very small actions, right? And if we all take one small action, those actions will culminate into big change. In the workplace, ask yourself this question: how many women are you on your team? Are they being paid equally? If they're not, why not? And maybe you can advocate for that issue. If you're a man in a household, are you sharing the responsibility of care and domestic work? That maybe we can just start there, right? Like these are very, very simple and micro things that we can all do, but they actually make a big difference. If you're a father, are you taking the role as a babysitter, or are you a parent, right? Are you spending time with your children as much as you can? And so I think it really takes this very small micro changes that will hopefully create more lasting change in the future. But the bottom point is we have to do something, right? We have to do something. We can't sit back because no one else is going to do it for us. We have to do the work.
I want to come to the present. You are now special advisor for global hunger.
Yeah.
How does that work intersect with the work of gender inequality, and tell us what's going on with global hunger?
So global hunger breaks my heart because hunger is still the leading cause of death in the world.
Wow.
And a child dies every 4 seconds, Kunle. 4 seconds.
Wow.
We could count 1, 2, 3, 4. A child just died. We'll count another 4. A child just, and as someone who almost died from hunger, it's very, very personal to me. And you ask the issue about gender. In fact, every inequality has something to do with gender, right? Because women are continuously being oppressed. They are continuously left behind on any of these inequalities. If you go to an African community, my own village, I can speak about my own village. When there's scarcity of food, the women go and fetch the food, they cook the food, they will feed the children and the husband, and then they will eat last. And usually there's nothing left to eat. So, women are constantly being left behind on these issues. And so we really have to look at how we can gender mainstream the work that we do. We also know that women are the primary farmers in most communities, and yet they don't even own the land. They're not given the same access to assets and resources. If we just did that, if we gave women equal access to assets, we would be able to actually reduce global hunger in a significant way. So that is the work, to make sure that our policies are looking at the gender dimension on every single inequality, including hunger.
I like that. So we just need to push legislation through that will give ownership rights
Yeah,
to women as well as to men.
absolutely.
Okay. Big one, big one. All right. So let me take a minute again to remind folks, please put your comments and questions in the chat. There are some people from Zimbabwe here who are giving you shout outs.
Ah,
In DP,
yay!
what's in DP?
Dave, what's up?
What's up? Okay, DP, there's a DP here. Now there's some more Shona comments, but I can't speak it. So yeah, it's nice. All right, but I want us to also talk about your experience, your transition from Harare to London. Now, you finish, after you leave the Admiral Tate primary school, you go to secondary school in Zimbabwe,
Yes, I
right?
do. Yeah.
And then you finish secondary school and you work. So tell us about working in Harare and then moving to London.
Yeah, so I had finished my secondary school. I really wanted to go to university because I knew that in order to work for the UN, I needed to have a university degree. But my family didn't have the money to do so. In fact, I have 3 siblings, and it was my responsibility as the eldest child to also contribute. So I ended up finding a job working in a supermarket, which at the time really felt very defeating, Kunle, I have to say, because my father worked in a supermarket and he hadn't gone to school, and I had ended up at this really nice school and I was working in a supermarket. Initially it really, I was disappointed in myself. I thought I had let my family down because they'd invested so much in me. But it also gave me an opportunity, though, having a job, and I was able to raise money and contribute towards my siblings' education, and they all finished their school, which was really amazing. And at that point, I realized that I still had my dream. I wanted to work for the United Nations. And so my my grandmother, was really kind enough to contribute towards my ticket to go to London. She sold a few of her cows and goats and bought me a ticket to London. And I arrived there with £250 to my name, determined, to get my job at the United Nations, and everything literally fell apart. Everything fell apart. I ran out of money. I couldn't find the job. I almost became homeless. And then eventually another miracle happened and everything worked out.
No, but that story is remarkable in and of itself, right? You
Yeah.
talk about your Ukrainian friend,
Yeah.
roommate slash friend,
Yeah.
who helps you get the job at the call center,
Yeah.
I think, and then from there you are able to get into university, London School of Economics, is it?
No, that was my postgrad. No, my first one was a very small university that really was like for immigrant children, and so I went to this very small university in London first. Yeah.
But still, you get in there,
Yeah.
you have the job, you're able to pay for that, and then when you go and apply for the research assistant job, talk to us about that, how you got that interview.
Yes. So that was a very, very interesting time for me, because at the time, I was now an intern working for one of the NGOs, and it was an unpaid internship. And I was just happy because it was an NGO called the United Nations Association, which was set up to promote the work of the UN. So it was just for me one more step closer to getting to the UN eventually one day. But I knew that in order to work for the UN, I needed to either find my way to the US, to New York City, or go to Geneva. I didn't have any money to do that. I didn't have any visas to do that. So I just stayed in London, and I said, you know what? I'm going to keep on praying and working hard, and then the rest will work itself out. And sure enough, in a very surprising way, the UN set up an office in London to work on this project, and I applied for this role. But they were looking for a researcher with a PhD and 12 years of research, which I didn't have. But it was an HIV/AIDS project that was going to be looking at the issue of HIV/AIDS on the African continent. And from the age of 14, I started volunteering at HIV/AIDS clinic with my aunt. So I knew a lot about the pandemic. I knew a lot about community engagement and what was required in terms of our response to the pandemic. And so I applied on that front, and initially didn't get invited to an interview, and I kept pushing and pushing and pushing until one day they invited me. Obviously, I didn't get the PhD position, but I was able to get something else.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth called the office 17 Fridays in a row
I did.
in order to get an interview. She
I
is
did.
being very humble, but she was persistent and committed. And then she got the interview, and the interviewer said, well, you don't have the skills,
Yeah.
thank you for coming, leave. Before Elizabeth leaves, she says, well, I could become an assistant. And then the interviewer, Julia, says, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So you are remarkable in so many ways. And I think you are right. Growing up with an adult, growing up with Gogo, helped you really learn how to interact with adults and maybe not overcome any sorts of fears and preconceived notions. It must have, because that's remarkable. Just persistence and being able to offer options and say, look, I'm here. You
Yeah.
need me. You really need me. Take me.
But I don't want to oversell myself though. I was
No,
really
you
with
should.
No, I was really with insecurity though, Kunle. It was really, really hard. I mean, part of the thing that kept me going, obviously my gogo was a freedom fighter, so I know what it means to fight for something that you want. And so I had this tenacity and the perseverance to keep pushing, but also, I was also at the same time though starting to doubt myself, right? Can a girl from Africa really do this? Because people kept telling me this is too big of a dream. Like, you can never become this person. And I think that being pushed back so many times gave me the, almost like the fire to say, well, I'm going to prove you wrong because, I work really, really hard and I want this so much. And I know that I would do something meaningful with the opportunity. And so that kept me going. But I had moments of doubts, certainly.
But you push through. You push through, and the story is just fantastic, phenomenal. Let me read some of the comments.
Okay.
And let's take some of the questions. So, folks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. From Zara says, hey, hi, Elizabeth. Your story is quite inspiring. I'm a storyteller. How do you think about telling your story in a way that connects with different audiences?
So, I mean, in writing my book, and I don't know if this will answer your question, but in writing my book, I was very, very thoughtful about not making this book just about me, right? I found myself with this greatest opportunity to write a book for Scribner, which is one of the highly acclaimed publishing houses. And I realized I needed to make this an opportunity for my community as well and really tell my story as part of this bigger story of what it means to belong to a community, what it means to come from this blessed and beautiful African continent. I wanted this book is a love letter to my African continent. And so these things were so important to me because I wanted to be able to bring dignity to our stories, which sometimes I fail to find when the narrative is coming from outside. And so for me, that was a key thing, that I wanted this book to connect to my community, to my wonderful Zimbabwean country and my fellow brothers and sisters in the country, but also as a way for the world to also see my African continent, our African continent, through a different lens.
Wonderful. Another question from Farah. Thanks for coming today, Elizabeth. Based on your journey and life experiences, what advice would you give to your younger self if you met her today? That's a nice one.
You should dare to dream big. There's an African proverb, if your dreams don't scare you, they're probably not big enough. Dare to dream big and never let your circumstances diminish your dream. Just never let that diminish your dream. A girl from anywhere can be anyone, right? Look at me. If a girl from Africa can sit here, I think we all can become the things that we want to be with hard work and faith. And your community, you have to rely on your community. I wouldn't be here had it not been for my community. My colleagues will continue to uplift me on a daily basis. And I think that's another important thing that, sometimes when people start rising up, they think about just themselves and they forget that, they're a tree, and you're part of this tree, and you need your roots to anchor you. And so that's my advice to you. Dare to
Very
dream
deep.
big.
Very deep. Very deep. Lauren asks, if you had to pick one learning from your entire for the reader to take away, what would it be?
You cut off, Kunle. Do you mind? You
Oh,
froze for a
let me
second.
read that again.
Yes.
If you had to pick one learning from your entire memoir for the reader to take away, what would it be?
That none of us are ever too small to make a difference. There's another proverb in the book, one of my favorite, which is, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try spending a night in a room with a mosquito. You know, it's a very simple way, I think, of illustrating that none of us too small to make a difference. I'm only here because one girl gave me a bowl of porridge, and I've been able to create change in the world because, this one person has been able to do that. And I think sometimes we often underestimate our ability to create change. I think we get overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. And we kind of think that maybe, what can I do? I'm only one person. But I think time and time again, I've realized one thing, that there's one Nelson Mandela, one Martin Luther King, one Malala. Most importantly, there's one you, and you can make a difference. You just have to be passionate about the thing, but all of us have to be involved in some way in trying to uplift those around us. It's a community. We owe it to each other.
I love it. I love it. Sheena, she writes. She's definitely from Zim. She writes in Shona here. Maswera say Elizabeth.
That's where kind of a square hour. That
Okay.
means, how was your afternoon? I said, I had a really lovely afternoon.
Beautiful. She writes more here, but I don't think I would do it. I don't think I would do it justice. So let me skip that. And then Anya gave you the Indepi, Elizabeth. She says, no question, just a shout out from a fellow Southern African. Yeah, nice one,
Ah,
nice one, nice one.
you
Okay,
see, Kunle, you see the love from the continent.
I see
You
it.
know,
I
and
feel it.
I'm telling you, I keep telling people that time and time again, I'm reminded that being African is the best part of who I am. That we come just to come from this continent. We have our own challenges, like every other country has its own challenges. But at the core, our people are very compassionate people. We care about one another. We know that we belong to a community, and we'll try our best. I mean, I remember just being on the African continent, no matter where I am, because I travel a lot with my work, I always feel like if I fall, someone will catch me. When I'm in New York City, I have to think twice. I have to think twice about that. I have to think, like, if I fall, will someone catch me? I even think that not only will someone not catch me, they may even kick me and say, "Get out of my way!" Right?
That
So,
is so true.
thank you, Africans, for being in the house today.
I love it. I love it. We have another. We have a couple of comments more. One from Precious. Precious is Nigerian. Ugwumba. I can
Yeah.
tell that Precious is from Nigeria. She says, "Thank you for your time, Elizabeth. What are you most excited for in the future?"
Oh, I love this question. The idea that hopefully with my book, I can inspire more of us to create change, right? As a humanitarian, I'm constantly trying to recruit other people to come in and join the good fight, because the challenges that we face are not going to be solved just by governments, just by private sector, just by the United Nations. It really is going to take the individuals, the communities, because only us, only the communities can lead and inform change, because we know what the problems are. And if the community is not engaged, there can never be any sustainability. So what I'm optimistic and hopeful about is that this book is able to show that if a girl from Africa, which is me, is able to contribute a little bit to the world, perhaps you too can. And I think the more of us that are doing that, and especially for the African continent, I make a plea, because if we don't do it ourselves, someone is going to come in and tell us what to do. And that doesn't always end in the right way. So we have to be able to take ownership of what's happening on our continent. We have the youngest youth population in the world. That gives me hope. Youth means energy, it means opportunities. And so that's what I'm hopeful for the African continent to rise because of the power of our youth and again, our innovation and creativity.
I think I second you on that, and I will say that I'm seeing it from our dominance of entertainment.
Yeah.
Afro beats and music from all across the continent is just everywhere I go now. In Atlanta, I
Yeah.
get in an Uber, I walk into it, I hear African music playing, and
I
this was
know.
not the case 20 years ago.
It was
And
not.
it is. It's so I give our young people remarkable credits. There's a lot of good things going on in the tech ecosystem across
Yes.
Africa as well.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's
and I love yes, and I love to remind people even here in the US that mobile banking came out of Africa.
very true.
You
And
know,
Pesa,
it
you're
came out
right.
of Africa, came out of Kenya, right?
You're
And
right.
so we lead on so many things, we just don't get enough credit for them. So which is why we as Africans have to tell our own stories and tell people what's happening and what we are doing.
We do. We do. Angelina says, "Oh, I love Elizabeth's story."
Ah, thank you, Angelina.
We have a few minutes more, about 5 6 minutes left. So, anything else in particular you want us, any takeaways that you want us to leave with, to say, go do this
Yes.
first? You've told us about he for she. What
Yes.
else would you say to us?
So again, this being Women History Month, which started today in the US, and we have a month of celebrating, it's really important that we talk about gender inequality and the role that men have to play. I know I spoke about he for she really from a concept of what the movement is about, but really ultimately, this is a call for allyship, right? Gender equality, man, it's your issue too. We need you to be involved. We need you to be able to examine your privilege as well and create these equal spaces. And most importantly, I think we also need to make sure that when we are having the conversations around diversity and inclusion, that it's not only women congregating, right? We've got to make it into open forums. Some of the work we've done with he for she has been with corporations, including banks. And we found that initially, before the he for she movement was established, that all the gender networks were just women coming together, and men were never part of that. And the challenge is that then it just simply means women have to do all the work. And with he for she, we've introduced male allyship groups within banks like Barclays and BNP Paribas. We're working with Unilever, with McKinsey, to make sure that this is really like true solidarity around these issues. And that includes other genders as well. Gender is not binary. And I think also when we talk about gender, we often then exclude the other genders, and that is really damaging. We've got to make sure that when we talk about D&I, it includes everyone. And so that would be my call. I don't know what Google policies are. I hope that you are thinking about D&I, through this very comprehensive lens, because that is really important.
No, I can say this on behalf of Google that being that I've worked in a number of private sector companies, this company is committed to, at least I see, a diverse slate of co-workers anytime I get on a call, and it's I have to applaud Google. They talk the talk and walk the talk. So more
That's
power to
incredible.
Google.
That's
I want to
incredible.
ask you too, in the last few minutes we have, you
Yes,
worked in the private sector for some time,
I
and
did.
then you went back to NGOs,
Yeah, to the UN. Yeah.
to the UN. Yes, is the UN an NGO, or is just, or what do we call the UN?
We call an international organization.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So what's the difference? What were the how different was your experience when you were in the private sector, and then why were you drawn back to the international NGO
Yeah.
space?
Well, I mean, my whole life has been about this one big dream to become a humanitarian. And so when I stepped out of the private sector, it was really to try and gain new skills that would be useful for me to do even a better job in the UN. I wasn't planning on staying out of the UN. I realized at some point that, I think it's really, really helpful to be able to also have business acumen, even though we are running, humanitarian projects, because a lot of the work, there can be a lot of inefficiencies if you don't understand how business works, if you don't understand, how budgets work. And so I went to the private sector and I had the opportunity to work in corporate strategy for one of the leading pharmaceutical companies. And that experience is what allowed me to create He for She, because I had to create it from scratch and I had to think about a new way of looking at the issue. And I wouldn't have been able to do this without having, a corporate strategy background with me. So it was really a way to enhance my UN work that I went to the private sector.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Elizabeth in Nyamayaro. I think I said that well. Nyamayaro.
You
Don't
did?
worry. It is really, really, really nice meeting you. And I wish
Likewise,
you
Conrad.
continued success. Thank you for the inspiration. I have a 4-year-old daughter. When she's
Yeah.
old enough, I'll make sure that she reads your book.
Thank you so
Yes.
much, Kunle. It was really lovely to spend time with my brother and be back in this nice African sense of community. So thank you so much for taking the time to do
Amen.
this.
I hope one day we meet in person.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much,
All right.
Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Have a
All
lovely
right.
day. And
Have a
take care.
wonderful rest of your day as well.
Okay, take care. Bye.